Davis, who's the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Parks and Recreations at Los Angeles. He's a technology leader and a board experience in governance, architecture, security, design, and delivery. He has extensive experience in delivering of complex projects using various technologies on-site, offshore, employing a very strong process encompassing traditional interactive or agile processes in a high object-centric environment. Today, he is going to be speaking on delivering secure software. So everyone, let's welcome Terence Davis to the stage.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Kim, for the kind words. I apologize. I'm getting over a cold, so if I have a couple of coughing fits, I do apologize, but I'll try to keep them to a minimum. So I wanted to talk about secure software delivery today. But first, let me give a quick background about myself. Kim already spoke. I'm at Los Angeles County Parks and Recreation. Been with the county for 4 years, a little over 4 years now, and with Parks and Rec for a little over 18 months. Overall, I've got 35-ish years of architecture, software delivery, offshore, on-site delivery, and design. You can see, you can see my email address, phone. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm not really on Twitter or anything like that, so don't look. I'm an old C programmer, but my new favorite language is Python. I don't know if anybody... Excuse me. Yeah, it's a great language. Did lots of enterprise applications for companies like Citibank, ABN AMRO, and Holland, Charles Schwab, Sony, Cetera, AssetMark, lots of companies in LA and around the world. One thing about me, if you talk to me for more than about 5 minutes, you'll see I love two things. One is skiing, and that's me in the middle there. And the other one is Star Trek. So, you know, I'm kind of a nerd's nerd. Right? All right. All right. So let me give a little plug for Parks and Rec. You know, Parks is different. Parks at LA County really is a department of fun, right? Every other department in LA County is not as fun as us, right? Even beaches and even library, right, is about homework, right? Who wants to go to a library for homework? Parks, we have, you know, more than 180 individual locations. Some you wouldn't think about, right? Some are the Hollywood Bowl, John Henson Ford Theater in Hollywood, the Arboretum, which has a great show, actually just ended up in over the holidays. You know, parks and trails and nature areas all across LA County. And LA County is quite big, right? LA County is, and I didn't know this, larger in population than all but 10 states, right? There's 10 million people in LA, which, you know, it's a lot. We all know that traffic sucks. But it's bigger than all but 10 states in terms of population. That just blew my mind when I heard it. So, thanks. So LA County is really quite large. At Parks, we have a lot of great programs. We have Parks After Dark, which is for kids. We have, I think, 3 or 4 different settings of that. You can go to the parks, you know, from like, I think it's 6 to 10 p.m., and they have lots of programs for kids and families. We have all kinds of programs at the parks during the winter, during the summer. So, you know, I encourage you all to go to the LA County Parks. I think if my, I don't know if my director is watching, but, you know, I gave us a good blurb. One more thing about parks, we just had a strategic plan. It's a couple years in the creation of it, and we really focused on equity and reaching the most vulnerable populations, the most at-risk populations within LA County. There's a link here on the slides. You can go read it. It's also, if you go to parks.lacounty.gov, it's fairly prominently available that you can read it and see what we're going to be doing at Parks over the next 4 to 5 years. All right, so let me talk a little bit about the motivation for this talk. And again, it's about secure software delivery, right? And there's two key parts to that. One is the secure part. The other one is delivery. So in order to have, in order to have any sort of software, you got to deliver it, right? And so you want it to be secure. So this talk is going to be about how do you encourage, right? You can't guarantee it, but how do you encourage that the software that you do deliver, whether it's a vendor product or custom built, how do you encourage that to be as secure as possible? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have at Parks, and it's a fairly standard environment, right? We have cloud applications, we have vendor-based applications, we have workgroup applications, we have SharePoint applications, Excel and FoxPro, and unfortunately things like Microsoft Access and Delphi, although not too terribly much of that sort of stuff anymore. But this mixed bag of stuff is not really connected to each other. There's a lot of isolation behind this landscape. So this is a fairly typical picture. I think it's probably very much similar to what you guys all have at your organizations. County applications, enterprise applications are typically authenticated versus Active Directory. That's great, right? To me, that's kind of table stakes, right? Workgroup level applications, not so much. We often have our own custom authentication piece, which, as you well know, means that everybody is maintaining passwords, maintaining profiles themselves, which is a security risk, right? One of the other problems that I have, and not just at Parks, but lots of places, is that there's no way to access the data, right? There's no API. If I want to pull data out of something, whether it's an enterprise application, a county cloud-based application, or some of my workgroup applications, I can't get it, right? It's stuck in a silo. So that means that we have to use flat files, or we have to do something even uglier than a flat file. And aside from being a pain and limiting the sorts of analyses that I can do, that means that the control that the owner of the data and the control that I have as the consumer of the data is limited, right? I have to publish a whole bunch of data. I have to publish kind of the superset of information that I would ever want people to have access to, and I have to put it on an FTP site or a SharePoint site or something in order for the data to be shared. We have this all over the place at Parks, right? We get data from enterprise applications, and it's just a flat file. And so, it's not the worst thing in the world, but, in 2024 now, an API kind of should be something that applications understand, and they know how to deliver data in a secure way to the consuming applications, right? Again, aside from providing just make life easier, you can't do complex analytics, and we all want to have data warehouses. We all want to be able to, create connections between the data, and if the data is locked up, we can't do that, right? So these are my two pet peeves. On all the talks I give, API, Active Directory. All right, what is the what and the how of how you deliver the software, right? So the what is to enable rapid delivery of secure, business-focused applications, right? Modern, secure, cloud-based applications. Got to use AD. You got to have a responsive UI, right? And you got to enable the data warehouse. And how are you going to do that? Well, you have to establish a development capacity and a process within your organization in order to support that. Again, whether it's custom-based workflow applications, or whether it's cloud-based applications or vendor applications that you're contracting a consulting company to create for you, you have to have a process. And no matter who does it, there are certain things that are key to enabling that. And so I'm going to talk about a number of those during this talk. All right. So it's a quick table of content, or quick top set of topics that we're gonna cover. You know, the relationship between security and delivery. I have a couple of slides on a few words. Security must be paramount and thought of upfront in the project. You know, these are not revelatory concepts, right? Everybody knows these are the things you got to do, right? This is not, you know, earth-shattering information. But sometimes we forget, right? It's really easy to cut corners. It's really easy to not take security seriously. You know, it's really easy to not get sign-off from the business. And you know, that's where you kind of get into trouble, right? Maybe you get away with it for a couple of times, but over the period of many years, it's going to end up biting you in the butt. And maybe you don't have a terrible security breach, but flexibility isn't there. The business is all pissed off at you. So, right, if we do software the right way, we avoid lots of those problems. So we're going to try to get into some of those things today. All right, so security and delivery, as I said, they're inexorably linked. A couple of things that I find that really go into being able to deliver secure software is, you know, it's a team sport. It's not something that just the architect on the software project can do. It's not something that just, you know, the consultant can do. It's not something that just the business owners can do. It has to be everybody involved, right? Everybody has to understand that security is important, and that security is something that we all have to take seriously and we all have to work towards, right? It starts at the top, right? It can't just be, you know, when I was an architect, it can't just be me pushing it up and say, you know what, we have to have a secure delivery process. We have to have, you know, security in our infrastructure and in our network. It has to start from the CIO or the CTO of the organization. It has to have the executive team's buy-in. And of course, it has to be part of the development team's ethos to understand what it takes to build secure software and make sure that they follow that. It's also a balance. You know, if you deliver without strong requirements, or you don't really consider data in your software delivery, you're going to end up, you know, with insecure software, or, which is sometimes worse even, depending on your point of view, you're going to end up with software that doesn't satisfy the business, right? So you have to understand what you're going to deliver. On the other hand, if you just deliver too quickly, or you don't deliver anything at all, you've not helped, right? So it's that balance of understanding what do I need to deliver, you know, how do I make sure I understand the security risks, and you balance it out so that you end up delivering something real in a timely fashion, but it's secure, right? It's not one or the other. You have to always have both. All right. I said I was going to talk a few words on a couple of topics. The first one is Agile. Agile development is very common, and if I don't address Agile, somebody will raise their hand and ask, well, what about Agile, right? So in my experience, and I apologize if I offend some people, Agile is a really good way to avoid requirements and architecture, right? See, this has happened to you, right? So Agile can be good, and one of my favorite pictures here is the golden triangle, right? We all know this. Regular software development, cost, time, functionality, choose two, right? You can have it fast, but it's going to cost a lot, right? Or you can have functionality, and quick, but it's going to cost a lot. So, choose two. With Agile, and this can be okay, choose functionality, right? Because you're always going back and you're asking, is this what you want? Is this what you want? But it's not going to be quicker, and it's not going to be cheaper. And if that's your goal, and that's understood from the top to the bottom, that's fantastic, right? But make sure that everybody understands that's what you're doing, right? I have absorbed a couple of areas of Agile in my normal development process. The primary one is, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is understanding enough of the architecture and the design, understanding the key areas. It used to be, in the old days, we would have, 2 months, or 3 months, or 4 months, or 5 months of analysis and requirements with the business. Then we'd have another 3 or 4 months of, architecture and design with the technology team. And then we'd go away and be invisible for 5 or 6 months, and out would pop some software, right? So we'd be gone. You talk about a project, and then 8 months later, you'd have a delivery of something, right? And that sort of waterfall method, I think we can all agree is not the best. But there are some elements of Agile, and I think that if you adopt them properly, can help you to deliver real software in a timely fashion, in a secure way, be much more responsive to the business, right? Just don't cut corners with architecture and design. Other topic I want to talk real briefly about is low-code and no-code products. I've talked to a number of vendors, especially over the last 6 or 8 months, who are pushing these products. And they can be really cool. We actually have a number of them at the county, and they can be really cool. They can really accelerate your development. You have to be aware, though, in my experience, that the product, the low-code or the no-code product, has a certain view on the world. And if your use case fits in with that view, then it's great. The development speed, the rapidity, the ability to really have a lot of people deliver software using it can be fantastic, right? If your use case is a bit outside, however, of the way that the low-code or no-code product was envisioned, it can cause problems. And I'll give you an example. I had a shadow IT project that we didn't know about, and it came up, and it was leaking information, or it was exposing information we didn't really want exposed, right? So we discovered, hey, this isn't so good, right? And we needed a quick fix. And unfortunately, this system was critical to a program that was going live like next week. So we had to find something fast to fix it. And I thought, well, we can use Microsoft Forms, right? The requirement was very simple. Upload a file, send it off to somebody who has to process the file, right? Really, really simple. Like 3 people were involved. It wasn't a big system. No worries. We'll use Microsoft Forms, right? Even I could write Microsoft Forms. But within our environment, and I don't know if this is common, but in our environment for Microsoft Forms, the attach file feature had been turned off. And I don't know if that was a decision that was made by ISD, or if it was because I wanted people outside of LA County Parks to be able to do the upload. But in any case, we couldn't do the simple thing and upload files in this way using Microsoft Forms. No codes product, great product, use it in other ways, fantastic. Wasn't going to work for this. We thought, okay, no worries. We'll use another one, another low-code, no-code product, Adobe Sign and Power Automate, 2 other great products. This is where we eventually went, but as part of the upload process for the file, it copied the file to the target where we wanted it to go, to the recipient of the owner, or the recipient of the file. But it also copied the file to the account, the SharePoint account, with which the application was built. So there were 2 copies of this file, right? And that's just how the low-code solution behaved, right? And it wasn't the end of the world, because that second copy was within our network, behind the firewall, and it was owned. It was the account was owned by a developer, right? So it was in a secure location. Programmer's not going to do anything, bad with it. But we didn't, that wasn't by design. Because of the way that the low-code product works, it did that for us to help us, right? And what we had to do is, when we discovered this, is we created a job that goes and deletes all of the files, right? I think it runs every hour, or maybe it runs with every upload, I forget. But the point being, the application tried to help us, right? And it created another security hole, right? The whole point of this was to avoid the shadow IT security hole that had been created, and we got another one, right? Fortunately, we could close that one, right? So, you got to be careful with some of these low-code, no-code tools sometimes, because they help you in ways that they don't tell you, right? And that can be bad. All right, so security is step one, as I mentioned, right? It's got to be thought of up front. It's got to be something that is considered from the beginning of the application development process through to the end and beyond, right? We had a couple of speakers before talking about, all the various threat actors, right? So once you deploy something, that's not enough, right? You have to really consider the applications that you have within your infrastructure, within the constellation of applications within your organization as a whole. One of the things that I did when I got to Parks is I had my CISO team create a picture, and it's this picture kind of in the lower left of the screen there, that showed all of the network topology, not in excruciating detail, but it put all of the applications, all of the types of network traffic into a picture that we could look at all at once, right? It wasn't abstract, right? It was something that you could look at. I'm a very visual person, and so to me, this really helped, right? So we have a bunch of VLANs, we have Wi-Fi access points all over the parks, we have cameras, we have custom applications, we have our protected network, and I wanted a picture that I could, show to the other security teams, right? So within the county, there's something called ISD, which is their internal services department, and they actually own the network. I don't own my network, right? They do a very, very good job of securing the network, and everything that we put on the wire is approved by them. But it's approved kind of in isolation. So I wanted to make sure, with all of these things that we've added, we have these R0 things that sterilize the air. We have cameras. We have kiosks that have all sorts of stuff going on in all of the different parks. How do all of these things fit together into a topology, right? And by deploying all of these things on different network segments with different functionalities and different access from the outside in, have we, inadvertently created any problems, right? So I had the team create this picture, and I ran it by the county security officer, and I ran it by the ISD, the network gurus, the guys that put the whole thing together, just to get their stamp of approval, right? Because I don't know everything that's going on. I want another set of eyes, and this evolved over, I don't know, 20 years. This network has been put together, so things change, and there's new understanding and new attack vectors. So I wanted them to take a look. And now I can say, if there's a breach, well, ISD took a look, and it's not my problem, right? So I recommend that you do this every couple of years when you have big changes, or when you have a lot of deployments that are done, just to make sure, are there any things that that might have changed in the last 5 years? The other thing about security as step one is you got to look at the specifics of the application that you are developing, right? Any individual application, you know, does it collect PII? Does it share PII? Does it have a lot of legacy integrations, right? Those are fun, you know, from being serious. You know, integrations, like I said, I'm the nerd's nerd. Those are fun for me, right? But they can be complicated, right? Is it a public-facing application, which of course has its own, you know, enormous litany of security risks. So you got to think about those things and apply some of the tools that are here, some of the frameworks, you know, like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, to understand what's the attack surface of this thing. You have to think of it up front. All right, what's the data picture, right? In short, and this is common knowledge, right? You can't leak what you didn't capture. So if you don't need to capture a piece of information, don't, right? You don't need it. Maybe it's available someplace else, right? If you captured it, well, then you have maybe you have 2 or 3 or 4 different places where the same information is captured within your organization. You know, which one is the gold standard, right? I don't know, right? So, you know, don't capture it if you don't need to. Try to use existing sources of data, right? On that topic, the existing data quality is going to be horrible, right? We all know this. You have a system, you're trying to leverage that data, or you're trying to migrate an older system to a newer system. Maybe it's a legacy application that you're migrating to the cloud. That data is going to be garbage, right? It's going to be so terrible, right? I had situations, right, where there was a field that was for T-shirt size, and it was repurposed to be, what was it? It was repurposed to be, you know, married or not. Or there was some crazy thing that was used, right? These things happen all the time. So the data portion of your project is going to be equally as hard as the rest of the project all by itself, right? So I have had numerous projects, individual teams dedicated to creating the data ingestion and understanding the data. It's really fun, but also really hard. And you got to have people who really understand it. And there's a lot of tools out there that you can use to get a feel for how the data is, the quality-wise and groupings and all that stuff. There's some great tools out there. One thing that I find really fun are some of the data sharing possibilities. So if you are sharing data outside and there's multiple applications that are sharing related but different subsets of that data, you can inadvertently leak information. And it's a little bit technical, but it's a great topic. There are algorithms, differential privacy, T-closeness, K anonymity, that can help you to think about, if I'm sharing this data, how do I protect against situations where I'm leaking, where people can take data set A and data set B and put them together and glean something that they couldn't glean before. So these are, you know, really cool tools, cool technology, but it's fairly new. I guess it's academically it's an old concept, but its use in practice is fairly new. But I encourage you, if you do have a lot of data sharing, take a look at some of these algorithms and technologies, and they can help you out. All right. When we start to get into delivery, right? In short, if your project is going to succeed, it's because the requirements are good. If the requirement is going to fail, it's always, almost, because the requirements are bad, right? It's just not that complicated, folks. If the requirements are light, or they're continually changing, or you haven't really gotten sign-off by the business, the project is, maybe you deliver it and maybe it does what the requirements say, but if it's not what the business wanted, it doesn't matter, or they're not going to use it, right? If the requirements are nebulous, you're going to deliver something that nobody wants, or it's not clear. The other part of requirements is the data, and you got to have clear data requirements. You got to, as per the previous picture, you really got to think about it. And data is really part of requirements, but it's so critical that I broke it up. You got to have good requirements, good understanding of data in order to succeed. You have only one, you're likely not going to succeed. All right. So, what can you do to encourage a successful set of requirements? Well, first is you got to have a good BA, right? You don't want the CIO or the CTO or the business to write your requirements. The reason being, the CIO or CTO is, I'm too busy. I know, I can do it and I have done it, but I don't have time. So you need to have a business analyst look at their requirements. The reason being, you don't want you want the BA to do it and not the business to do it. The example I always use is, the business is thinking about requirements, thinking about processes, and they're going through a process that happens on Wednesday, right? And if there's something different that happens on Tuesday, but it's not Tuesday, the business is not going to think, oh, it's different in different situations. The business analyst will think along those lines. That's really the art of business analysis, is understanding and helping to tease out what the business really wants and how the business operations really work, right? And that's an art. And I have a new BA, and he's been great. He went from zero, he came from outside of parks. He went from zero knowledge of parks to 100 miles an hour in about 3 months. Really a great guy. And I don't think he's on the virtual, but he's been really great. You need folks like that, right? You want them to really be able to talk to the business and pull out those requirements. What else? Oh, right. So scope creep. Again, not revelatory. We all know, right? Get the requirements clean and decide this is what we're going to build in phase 1. And if you want more stuff, no worries. We'll get to it, but let's get phase 1 out of the way before we jump into this other stuff. Because if we never deliver anything again, we haven't helped. And if we try to cram too much into phase 1, we're likely to cut corners, or the business will change their mind. So let's get phase 1 out of the way, and then we'll go on to phase 2. All right, some artifacts in my experience that help you to deliver good requirements are various sorts of workflow, right? We have the user workflow, we have data flow, and we have the use case flow. So the user workflow is swim lanes with tasks that occur at each step. It's probably too small to read. Yeah, too small to read, but you all know what this looks like, right? It helps you to really understand what the individual steps from a user point of view are doing, right? Data flow, pretty self-explanatory. Where's the data coming from? What's happening to it? And where's it going, right? That's the middle picture. If you get a list, if you enumerate all of the input data sources, whether it's an integration or data entered by the users of the application, you'll have a handle on how much data do I have? What's going to be the scope of my data exercise here, right? And then where's the data going? And a couple of things we also always know about the data is the incoming systems, we're not going to change them, right? We can't say, you know what, this new system needs you to change your output format. If they had an API, maybe be in better shape, but they don't. So you gotta work with what you got. They're not going to change their data format, right? The downstream systems, same. If you're replacing an existing system, like we've all done, right? You replace a legacy mainframe system with a nice, shiny new Python, or back in the day, Java application. You have to be able to meet the target systems where they are in terms of what they're expecting, right? So this data flow diagram really helps. And last, my favorite out of all these is the use case flow. And these are really a system view of the user workflow, right? What's happening when certain user actions occur. And it flows from the user to the user interface, to the system, and sometimes to the quote-unquote database, right? So you can have 3 or 4 columns in the use case flow, and I really like these pictures because it really helps you to identify either skipped steps or implied processing that you forgot about, right? Things that just sort of you assume occur, and then you realize when you look at the use case, oh, gee whiz, that's a whole nother thing that we have to deal with, right? The way that I typically write these use case flows is they're very vertical space heavy, right? So you have a lot of space in your document, but it's very easy to see from step to step to step what's happening. So I encourage you really to write artifacts, right? Build your requirements to include these things. All right. Last thing on requirements is get a sign-off, right? You've talked to the business. You've got their requirements. You've got an executive sponsor. Get their John Hancock on the requirements. This is what we're going to give you, right? And with the schedule, it's going to take us whatever X months to deliver, phase 1 of the product, right? Make sure that they know that when they sign off, it means that's what they're getting. And they don't get to change their mind and have the same schedule. You can change your mind, but it's going to be later, right? Again, these are not revelatory things, but it's important to deliver secure software that you have the goalposts are set. It's going to be this much, and I'm going to deliver it in this time frame so I can do my secure processes and I understand what I have to do. Oh, as it happens, I've got, we'll see that in a little bit. I've got a couple of projects that are at this stage. I'm actively getting sign-off from the business owners right now, and it's important. All right, create a plan, right? This is a very basic plan I created in Excel. If you want to use Microsoft Project or Monday or one of those other systems, great. Just do it, right? They're simple. It helps you to lay out stuff. It's not rocket science, but it can really go a long way to helping you to understand what's the, how long have I, this is not revelatory. How long have I assigned for requirements? I have 4 programmers. Have I overtaxed all of the programmers? Just put it in Excel. These are really fast to put together, a lot faster than Microsoft Project, and they can tell you a lot about what the project is going to do, right? If you want to use Microsoft Project, that's great. I typically end up doing so, or I have I have somebody on the team do it. But if you just want to get a feel for where you're at, just use Excel. It works great. If you have multiple projects going on, right? Who doesn't have multiple projects going on? You have to cascade. You have to schedule things so that you're not overloading your development team or your QA team or your businesses. Again, use Excel. These are the 12 or 15, 10 of the applications that I have going on at Parks right now. The red ones are the ones we're worrying about. My team is not big enough to deal with all of them. So I've you can see I've sort of laid out, I've got development, requirements, development, QA for each of them, and I've just laid it out. It's not set in stone, but it lets us have at least a warm, fuzzy feeling that we've got this. I'm actually pretty confident that we'll be able to work the requirements and the development and the delivery within the time frame that I have, which is the end of June. So build something like this. It enables you to get that visual ID of, do we have too much going on? Am I overloading the QA? Am I overloading the development? So that you'll be able to deliver at the end of the day, right? Something simple. If you have a large IT team and you are a large IT group, a lot of projects, you could invest in some of the product management overview type products if you have to manage a lot of individual solutions. My team is small enough, we can just do it ourselves. All right, more on kind of what I've taken to enable me to kind of deliver secure software in a reasonable time frame is I aim for sufficient architecture and design. Like I said, in the old days, we'd go away for 4 months and write, 900 pages worth of artifacts, right? That's not so useful, I think we've all agreed, right? It's better identify kind of the overall architecture, the overall design, and then we can home in on what we want for the first phase, right? So you can see from this picture, I've got a lot of stuff that I want to do with this platform that I'm creating within Parks to enable me to develop applications. I've got integrations, I've got the use of Docker and APIs, and too small for me to read, key vaults and caching and logging. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I want this to provide to the development team to be productive. But I don't have to do it all at once, right? I identified for the first phase these half a dozen areas that I can use right now to jumpstart delivery to the business, right? In particular, Active Directory integration, like I said, one of my #1 pet peeves. A common profile so that I can start to leverage all the users within Parks will be able to see the same view of things without having to manage profiles individually. And some place to store data, some sort of an abstraction for data. That's all I wanted for the first phase, right? Not too extravagant, but it got us started. Then, for phase 2, we're adding a little bit of the integrations, we're adding a little bit of the data warehouse piece, we're adding a little bit for APIs, and that's something that we'll be delivering over the next, by June-ish, is this phase 2 for this architecture, right? We still have logging and more robust API and Docker and a million other things that I want to get going. But by phase 2, I'll have a pretty solid baseline that we can use to really, we can really use to expand the capabilities of the team. Sorry. Sorry. We can really use those capabilities to expand our ability to deliver software quickly, be more responsive to the business, and still, since we have a common view, we're not reinventing the wheel every time, security will be improved, right? Everybody's going to be using Active Directory. No more worries about authentication. Everybody's going to have a ability to use a common profile. No more worries about authorization, right? All of these common mechanisms to access the database. It's not going to eliminate problems, but it helps us to focus the security risk in something that we can control. All right, so as I said, what this got me was the ability to deliver to the business. We delivered something, the first version of this was delivered back in November, and it delivered a product that's used by like one person. But he, for the previous, 10 years, had to create a whole bunch of data by hand, chasing after a whole bunch of different people. I need this data, I need this data. He'd get it back in emails, he'd get it back in telephone calls, and now we had a web-based system that he could use to collect this data. It was a really big win. It was very visible. It's a document that goes to the CEO of LA County every year. So, it was really a big win, and for me, right, as within the first 6 months I was at Parks, it was a big win, but it also enables us to build on it and deliver even more as we move forward. All right, development. Development is hard, right? Secure development is even harder, but if the previous slides are taken seriously, right, if you think about requirements, you think about the business, you think about how it fits into everything else, and there's a million YouTube videos and other things that you can use to help you to develop and deploy software securely. Development's hard, but it'd be easier if you do some of these things. A couple of things about the development process I tend to follow is from Agile. Let's use small deliveries. We no longer go away for 9 months and come back and deliver the completed solution, right? That tends not to work. After we've got some requirements, maybe the first release takes a little bit longer, 3 months, 4 months or something, but we deliver something that the business can see, right? And we do that, after we kind of get a cadence going, every month or something we'll have something new that we can deliver until maybe it's not functional, but the business gets to see it, right? And at some point we're done and people can actually start to use this thing. A couple more pet peeves of mine, comments. Just do it. I don't care, right? People make the argument, oh, well, the code is self-documenting. It's baloney. It's not self-documenting. You yourself, when you read your code, will forget what it does, right? I'm fairly verbose in my comments. You can't read it here, but I have some pithy comments in the code right there. Just put the comments in. Explain why you're doing something. It helps you to understand why you did it, right? It helps, you can put in your thinking so that you say, I very often I say in my comments, especially with Python, says, this works, but I'm sure there's a much more Pythonic way to do it. And that reminds me that I'm thinking, I'm thinking like a C programmer, very procedural, right? And sure enough, I had that comment, and like 3 days later, I came back looking at this code, and I said, yeah, that's not right. And I had 20 lines of code, went down to 2. So put in the comments, make them reflecting the code, keep them updated, but do them. And don't give me it's self-documenting or it's too hard. It's not. The other big deal is logging, right? A lot of code can be automatically profiled and logged. There's a million tools out there that just make it brain dead easy to do. In the old days, we used to put in logging entries at entrance of a function and exit of a function. It just said, I'm here and I'm leaving. In between, there would be log entries of, I've got this computation, the value is whatever, 11. I cannot tell you how many times that trace has saved my butt, right? It's not that hard. Today's the horsepower in today's computers is so enormous that, the overhead of logging is insignificant. So, put in the logging. I really highly recommend it. All right, a couple more slides talking about deployment. Follow a source control process, kind of a no-brainer. Just do it. Git is great. It's free. We have it at the county. My team is using it. It's not so hard. Just use it. Here's an important one. Do not ever allow your team to copy a database from one place to another. That's anathema, right? It's just a bad idea. I force my teams, they create SQL from a DDL, and they create the initial data or the base data with DML, with insert statements, right? That way, it's repeatable. Every time I need to create an environment, I check out the DDL, I run the scripts, zap, I have a database. No muss, no fuss, it's always the same, it's not going to change. If there's a problem with my code because the columns don't match, it's because my code is wrong, right? Not because the DDL is wrong, because that's what's in Git, right? Same with the DML. If I have some base data, don't be copying that around. Especially don't be copying from QA to production, because you're going to have all kinds of stuff. If you have a configuration-based application, which basically everything is, you're going to have rows in your copied data that don't belong in production. You might have who knows what, right? You might have S3 keys. You might have all kinds of stuff that you just can't have, right? So create the database from DDL and DML, no exceptions, and use Git. All right, business acceptance. Once they've signed off, when you're done, show it to them. This is what we said we were going to build. This is what we built. If you have good requirements, that QA process and that verification process by the business should be pretty much, one for one, right? Shouldn't be all that hard. Make sure they use the application, right? They wanted it, so now that you're delivering it, make sure that they use it and sign off. Again, get a sign off. Yes, we did it. Couple comments on vendors. It's 2024. Authenticate against Active Directory. Again, one of my pet peeves. I've had vendors try to charge me $10,000 to create authentication against Active Directory. That's ridiculous, right? I'll give you an example. We have a Google Apogee application at the county. You know how you turn on authentication against Active Directory? You log in as an admin, go to authentication, you click AD, and it works. No $10,000, no 4 hours on hold with support. You just turn it on and you turn it off. That's how you should do it, right? It's a no-brainer. Another point about vendors is I'm going to hold you to the same standards I hold my team, right? So I want you to have architecture and design. I've had vendors say, "Oh no. We're an agile group. We don't do architecture. We don't do design. I don't have a test plan for you." My jaw falls to the floor when I hear that sort of stuff. Yeah, again, agile is not an excuse to avoid documentation. The other thing is, to vendors, sometimes your client doesn't know what they want. They're not as strong in process as they should be. So please, vendors, help us out. Force us to read your documents. Force us to sign off on the requirements, right? I had a vendor like in October last year, actually, no, I think it was more like in June of last year, who showed me a project plan from 2 years ago, right? All of the dates were ancient, and yet that was the plan that they were giving to us. I don't know how that happened. It was before my time, but I said, no, this is ridiculous. The vendors need to force us to do the right thing. We need help sometimes, and that's okay, right? I'm going to hold you to the standard. Vendors, help us to do the right thing. All right. I think that's the end of my talk. If you remember nothing else, right? Requirements and data, right? Get the requirements good, get the data good, you'll be well on your way. Didn't talk a lot about the shadow IT, but it's there. Be aware that a lot of solutions, a lot of systems that you've deployed, businesses are creative, right? Businesses get the job done. If IT can't help, they'll do something else, right? And you got to be responsive to the business, and you got to talk to them about their shadow IT so it doesn't bite you in the butt. Okay, I believe that's it. Thank you for your attention. Any questions anybody has? Oh, I think you're supposed to wait for the, sorry.
I have a question. Do you actually run static code scanners on your code to make sure your code does not introduce any vulnerabilities at this point?
At this point, my applications are small enough that I have not done that. I have seen very sophisticated scanners to do that, but they can be very expensive. So that's a good additional step. All of these steps that you might add will improve your security.
Yeah, but there is like I know the one that open source one is called SonarCube. That is open source that you might consider. But I understand you have a small shop or small thing. You don't have people to run the scan and fix the scan. I'm just curious. Thanks for the information. Now I know a little bit more about parks. Is this Department of
LA County Parks and Rec.
Parks. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Was there anything from the remote folks? No? Oh, one? Do you want to just read it and I'll try to address it?
Yeah, so we have a question from Serena. Serena asks...
Hi, Serena.
You were mentioning privacy engineering concepts to consider when designing an application. Have you applied those concepts to your software delivering projects? And she says, thank you.
So can you read it again? I didn't catch the beginning.
Say that again?
Can you read the whole thing again? I didn't catch the beginning.
Okay. You were mentioning privacy engineering concepts to consider when designing an application. Have you applied those concepts to your software delivering projects?
Thank you, Serena. I know where this has come from. It's a great class. Serena is a fellow student from Berkeley. We had a fantastic class. I'll give a plug for Daniel Aranki. He's a wonderful guy, teaches this secure privacy class at the Berkeley CyberSecurity program that Serena and I both went through. Really a great class, a great guy. So she's mentioning that the K-anonymity, differential privacy, and T-closeness algorithms. So to answer Serena's question, so at Parks, we have a couple of databases, a couple of solutions that track the number of the classes that the public has taken, right? So when we are distributing that across, when we're distributing the kinds of classes that people are taking, I typically use one of the concepts called K-anonymity to sort of obfuscate the zip code a little bit, right? So one of the things that can happen is if you publish a bunch of data with people's zip codes for the purposes of kind of grouping them together, you know, if your zip code is 90405 or 90407 or 90026 or 90027, that's fairly granular, right? You can identify a person to a fairly small locale if you know their address is 90027 zip code versus 90026 zip code. So what I typically do in those sort of situations is I will change that to 900. So anybody 90027, 90026, 90020, whatever, is in one larger bucket. So that's a way of enlarging the size of the group, which makes identifying any individual person harder, right? You could also do similar things kind of with gender and with medical conditions. You can say it's a heart condition as opposed to a heart attack or sclerosis or something like that, right? So you group things into larger and larger groups so that it makes identifying an individual one harder. Now, within Parks, we don't publish a lot of this data outside of LA County Parks users. There is a group within the county that does that. So my team, that data is still inside Parks, but I do use those algorithms to try and hide it a little bit more, even though it's not going anywhere. Thank you, Serena. Yeah, real quick, I think you only have like 2 minutes left. Do you just talk? Oh, you're coming? Great.
Well, first of all, thanks for sharing your experience. Very interesting.
You're welcome.
A couple of quick comments because of shortage of time, and then a question. Number one, in terms of what project management software to use. Excel is a great product, but it's not a project management software.
Yeah.
And because you talked about that you have multiple projects, I think you're talking about program management.
Yes.
So get involved with PMI, see what they're doing, and a better solution would be something like Primavera to use, because with that type of software, Microsoft Project is okay too, because at least gives you critical path. You can do resource allocation to satisfy a lot of optimization and assignment problems that you have. The other thing is that I want to say is that I'm a tennis player, and we play at Park and facilities. And for years, I was telling them, why don't you make reservation system online so that people don't have to come and queue up? And finally, I want to congratulate you. They did it, and there is now, you can reserve it up to 8 days ahead of time. However, I would like you to take a look at the website. It's functional, but it is like 1990s version. And it goes through a simple reservation. You have to go through 10, 15 screens to make it simple. So get an interaction design professional to take a look at it, and like you said, flow the user experience to bring it to 21st century.
At least not 1990, right?
Yes.
Thank you. I will be the first to admit that
and
our website could use some improvement.
And the last comment that I have is in terms of Agile. I've taught research project management at master PhD levels many years. From what I understand, Agile is not only on functionality. The whole purpose of Agile is to reduce the duration of the project. So time is the main consideration to crash the project. In fact, so that it will be faster from the time you start to the time of delivery. So it's not that the other two are ignored, because once you go to time, then it becomes optimization to make sure you can deliver it fast enough, and as a result, it's going to cost less too. So it is looking at all those three factors.
It can. Your entire, in order to do it right, your entire organization needs to kind of be aware of what Agile means. But you're right, you do end up with something more quickly. When you do it right, you'll get functionality to the business much more quickly than our old waterfall.
Super quick question. So you mentioned you use Python, and in Python you have to import a lot of other packages that's not written by you. What do you think about the vulnerabilities of those packages?
Yeah. So I did a study a couple years ago about a non-scientific study about the risks that some of the packages provide, that some of the packages give to you. And I do think it's a consideration to make sure that you're not importing more than you need. But it's kind of, if I needed a package, I wouldn't not use it. But I would, make sure that it's a package that has been used by others, right? Unless you want to rewrite something, you're kind of stuck, right? Every package that you import will theoretically save you time versus you having to write it. So that's kind of a trade-off. If I write it, can I write it as effectively as just using the package? Because then I may have introduced my own security problems, right, by writing it myself, whereas using something that's presumably been tested at least a little bit. So, I don't have a good answer for that, because it kind of depends on the specific situation. If it's a brand new package and it's critical to what you're doing, it brings more import to make sure that, well, maybe I should write it because it's critical to my business workflow and it's handling critical data. But, you have to decide, is the risk of the package worth the reduction in effort. And honestly, what I found when I did this research a couple of years ago, most packages are actually okay, right? There's some that can cause you tremendous pain. There was just one, I think, in Pi. There was something I read about that had been infected and was really bad. But I think that's the exception rather than the rule. Okay, I think we're out of time. But again, thank you very much for your attention. I'm around if you want to ask me some more questions. And software is fun. Just make sure you're careful. Thank you.
Okay. It's always great when we end with lots of questions. So thank you so much, Terence. It's really nice. I find really great speakers for these events. As many of you in here are connected with me on LinkedIn, I scour LinkedIn from city to city trying to find keynotes. I just need more ladies to say yes. So the ladies in the room, Annie's going to sit on the panel today. So just really trying to push for more ladies to join us. So, but very appreciative of any speaker I have. So how about another round of applause from Terence? I can't wait to see the Parks and Recreation website get updated by next year. That was kind of funny.
Right now, because that will get us. Websites are about content, right? So if the content is old and kind of stale, it's no good. So I'm practicing getting the business aware of that fact with the intranet site. So we'll have content owners that will, keep it updated for the intranet site. And then come June, we're going to roll over into the internet site for Park. So, check back in September. Hopefully we'll have something a little better.
All right,
thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. So we are going to take a break. We're going to come back in here. The schedule's a little off, so we're going to come back in here at 1:45. There's coffee and dessert over in the vendor room. We're going to do the spin wheel again, so be in here at 1:45 for the spin wheel. We're going to have 3 more winners. Again, there's dessert over there. Continue to visit our kind sponsors that have all kinds of giveaways that we'll be pulling for. And I'll see you back here in about 30 minutes.